Good design is all about creating a feeling. Have you noticed how everything has kind of lost its way in design in terms of the character and vibe? I mean, look at cars and how they used to be, and look at even planes and how they used to be, and old restaurants and how they used to be, hotels and how they used to be. They had such a vibe and such a feeling that really evoked a sense of interest and intrigue. And today we have this. One of the things I notice so much, even when going to places like maybe a restaurant or a cafe, really any type of new architecture today, I feel like we're losing sight and losing character and losing charm, losing warmth, losing coziness. We're losing the authenticity and becoming what I like to think of as this kind of Apple store of humanity in terms of our design. And I want to talk today about how you can create a feeling in your space. How do you do that? And how do you have a space that doesn't just feel like a cold box? A place that you want to be, a place that feels really good, like a cocoon of your coziness and of your character and your style, and a place when you walk in and you feel really good and really centered in who you are. For me, the type of space I want to create is a space that's inviting, that feels lived in, that feels used, that feels like it's intentional but not intentional, if that makes sense. A space that feels like there's people there, that feels comforting. That, to me, that's the most important aspect of a home. When it comes to making your home really curated and cozy and evoking that feeling, it's really important to kind of think about, one, what that feeling is, what are you trying to create? But when you go and buy things that are just off of the shelf, there isn't a soul and a living character to those things, and therefore in turn your home starts to represent that. It lacks that carefully curated look and that sense of warmth, and doesn't evoke that emotion that maybe you're looking for. One of the things that you can do to really come back to this and evoke that emotion, whatever that emotion might be, I'm just going to presume that maybe it's something similar to mine, of warm and cozy, inviting, lived in, is really staying in touch with natural materials and natural character of elements. So things like using stone, using brick, using wood. Let's not paint our wood white. I think that's part of why we've lost so much character in terms of architecture, is there's so many old, whether that's, homes from the 70s, homes from the 80s that had really amazing wood paneling that we've now painted white or gray. Leaving that warm wood and that true character and element of that home is so vitally important to the soul of that space. And especially with wood really adds such a warmth. I love a wood room. I think what we're seeing and what people are really coming back to is this kind of yearning for that warmth and that invitedness, that lived in, that feeling of nostalgia. And I think we can do that by leaving these elements intact with our homes that are centered around really the character of that space, that evoke that feeling. Another way we can do this is by buying things that are vintage and antique, things that have a soul, things that have a character, that have had many lives before. In turn, bring that into your space and your environment. Like I just mentioned, if you go and buy something off of a store at like Walmart, it doesn't have that past character and that past history, and so it's hard to create that warmth and that lived in feeling. Another way to really evoke a feeling of warmth and coziness is by having a lot of different texture. And so I think so often our spaces, the contemporary spaces, have lost this. We just have a lot of fake manufactured textures today. And so really looking at what types of textures you have in your space. One of my favorite ways is wool and wool blankets. Getting, whether that's some type of Welsh wool blanket on the end of a bed or a Pendleton vintage blanket. You can find these types of blankets a lot of times at antique malls or thrift stores. You can here and there, but flea markets especially is a great place to source these. Places like Etsy, obviously, or online stores, but getting a really cool patterned wool blanket and having that, whether it's on the end of your bed, whether that's on your sofa, draped over a chair, or having multiples of these. And this is also a really good way to add pattern into your home too, but this adds that really cozy feeling and creates that sense of, to me, a comfort and a feeling that I look for in a home. But texture is such an important element. Also mixing textures. So don't just have a sofa that's one particular fabric, and then you have maybe fabric chairs, and you have, you know, carpet in your home. Let's say you have carpet. Really looking through all of the different elements and materials. So do you have stone? Do you have wood? Do you have maybe some type of fur? Do you have wool? What natural elements and natural materials do you have around and do you have in your home? Because those will really evoke that warm, comforting feeling. If you go into a place, like I mentioned, doctor's offices, manufacturing warehouses, there's not much natural material. It's very cold, it's very sterile, and that's really what evokes that feeling as well. So really thinking on and concentrating on what natural elements and what natural materials do I have and what can I bring into my space that will help evoke that feeling that I'm looking for. Adding vintage lamps into your space rather than going and buying something like this, and in turn buying something like this, and can really evoke that feeling. So really think about in your space, what feeling are you trying to evoke? When you go into like a medical facility, you ever notice how just absolutely bright white and almost purple blue hue that light has? That's because that lighting is meant for, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's someone trying to do a particular task, they need that daylight lighting. And so that's why you see that bright, intense tone. And to me, when you're in a space like that, what is the feeling that you get? Do you feel warm and cozy? Or do you feel cold, lonely, discomfort, unhappiness, unease? That's a big one. I think sometimes it's hard to kind of pinpoint maybe an uneasy feeling that we have. And a lot of times I know I attribute that to things like office spaces or a medical facility. It's so much of that is because of that tone of that lighting. When you have that blue tone, that white, bright daylight tone, that doesn't evoke a feeling of coziness and warmth and comfort. And so that's why lighting is probably the most important aspect in order to create that feeling that you're looking for. That's my absolute favorite thing, is having a small little mini lamp in a kitchen. So putting that on your kitchen counter, even when you're cooking or you have friends over and you have this little tiny lamp that's on your kitchen counter, maybe underneath your cabinets, it just creates such a warm glow. Even a buffet lamp, if you have a buffet table or if you have maybe a more formal space like that, you can have lamps that have a soft lighting. You definitely want to have a lower wattage bulb, something like this. This gives you that warm, soft light feeling. And so that's where you get that feeling of comfort and ease and coziness from. I think a lot of times too, we have ceiling fans. So we live somewhere that's hot during the summer and you need to have the air circulation. It's just essentially impossible not to have a ceiling fan. And so a lot of the ceiling fans come with that overhead light. Well, you can get ceiling fans that don't have that overhead bulb. They don't have a light at all. Eliminate the white overhead daylight bulb lighting that's coming down and shining down, because that's what's creating that uneasiness. You know, sometimes because I do, you know, a lot of sourcing and antique and vintage selling and dealing, I have mini lamps that come in and out of my home. And so I'll have a lamp for a little while on my island and then I'll change it out to a different lamp. But there's something that's so amazing about just a little tiny lamp and what it gives and the feeling that it gets. But lighting is really the most key element, I think, to evoking that feeling that you're looking for. So when you're really thinking through what feeling am I trying to create in my home or my apartment or my space, really analyze and think about your lighting, because you'll be so surprised how when you walk into the next manufacturing office or grocery store or doctor's office, you'll see that lighting that I'm talking about, that white tone lighting. If you have that type of lighting or that bulb or a fluorescent bulb, either stop using that or change out those bulbs to a more warm tone. You'll be so happy that you did. One of the things I'm really focusing on and trying to do in my Northern California home is only putting things in the house that have and are real, true, honest materials. And so this can be a little bit more expensive to do, and partly why I think it's really important to do rooms and stages when you're doing any kind of remodeling. But what can you add into your home that isn't a fake material? So today, in today's world, there's so many fake materials. It's almost impossible in terms of interior design, or to buy a house nowadays that doesn't have that. In terms of old architecture and old homes, that's what we would see. It was all real natural materials, whether that was brass or metals, whether that's real wood floors or brick, real cement or stone. One of the things I love about Frank Lloyd Wright and his design was his use of natural materials, even through tile or through cement blocks. It's such a way to evoke a cozy, natural, very warm, comforting feeling by using real, honest materials, trying to stay away from things that are faux if possible. It's hard sometimes, I realize that, when you're renting, so you have to bring those things in on top and layer those onto your space, because you can't obviously change out the flooring in an apartment. If you are doing a remodel like I'm doing on my home in California, only bringing in things, and for me it's going to be slower because there is a heavier cost obviously with real materials. I want to do a slate type flooring. We have a lot of wood. There's a wood peak ceiling you can see here, but I'm thinking what I want to do is a real natural slate dark flooring. And so it's just all of those elements and really thinking through, what can you bring in that's natural? What can you bring in that's an honest material rather than a faux material? And that'll really help evoke that feeling as well. I want to be part of a world of art that has a soul and a past. And so I think we can all work together and we can all create ways. Hopefully this has given you a couple ideas of ways that you can evoke that feeling of whatever that is that you're trying to create in your space. Like I said, for me, it's all of those feelings that are of a lived in space, somewhere where there's memories and stories and a place where people can put their feet up and relax. That's something for me that's important. I know in my house here in California, I don't want a house that feels precious. I don't like the feeling of a house that feels precious. That's just me personally. I love things where people can sit back on a sofa and put their feet up, or you can have a dog jump up on a couch and lay next to you. It's not a feeling of, preciousness because you went out and bought maybe a, $10,000 sofa and you don't want someone putting up their feet. I personally, for me, that's one of the reasons why I really like to buy antique and vintage furniture, whether I reupholster it or I don't reupholster it. Using, especially if you do reupholster it, doing it something like with a really nice thick wool fabric, or things that have more character to them, even in a pattern, because they're more forgiving. And so you can have your feet up. You can have people have their dogs over and jump on a sofa if that's, for me, what I like. But that's part of that lived in feeling. I don't feel precious about things. I don't mind my kitchen table getting scratches on it. I like my countertops to be used. I like the feeling of people living in a space and beating things up. And that's part of why I love the character of old things, because like I said, it has a story and it has a past to tell. It's been around, and to me, that's what really evokes that feeling. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you like and subscribe. I've had a lot of fun making these videos and just appreciate you being here. See you next time.